My name is Inez, and at 59 years old, I never imagined I would have to make one of the hardest decisions of my life regarding my only daughter Sophia's wedding. When my husband passed away, I promised to give her the world. I worked double shifts as a nurse to put her through college. So when her fiancé Brandon called me the night before their lavish wedding and said those words, something inside me finally broke. I knew what I had to do. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. When Peter, my husband, died from a sudden heart attack 15 years ago, my world shattered. We had been high school sweethearts, married for 24 years, with dreams of retiring to a small cottage by the lake. Instead, at 44, I found myself a widow with a 13-year-old daughter to raise alone. The life insurance helped initially, but it wouldn't last forever. I had been a nurse at Riverside Community Hospital for most of my adult life, and after Peter's death, I picked up extra shifts whenever possible. Night shifts, holiday shifts, weekend shifts, I took them all. My co-workers became my support system, covering for me when Sophia had important school events I couldn't miss. Maria, the charge nurse who started the same day I did, back in 1989, became my closest friend. She would bring homemade meals to our house when I was too exhausted to cook, and help Sophia with science projects when I worked late. Despite our modest income, Sophia never wanted for anything important. I made sure of that. She was a brilliant student, earning a partial scholarship to Washington University. I emptied my savings to cover the rest, taking out a small home equity loan to help with her living expenses. Every penny was worth it when she graduated with honors in business administration. Sophia got a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city, and I couldn't have been prouder. She had her father's analytical mind and my determination. At 25, she was already making more money than I ever had, but she remained grounded and kind. We had Sunday dinners together every week, a tradition I cherished. Then came the charity gala 3 years ago. Sophia's firm had donated to a children's hospital fundraiser, and she attended as one of their representatives. That's where she met Brandon Sullivan. From the photos she showed me afterward, I could see why she was attracted to him. Tall, with perfectly styled dark hair, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly salary. But it was his confidence that Sophia couldn't stop talking about. How he commanded attention when he spoke. How the event organizers seemed to know him personally. Brandon came from the kind of wealth I could hardly fathom. His father, Thomas Sullivan, had built a real estate empire spanning 3 states, developing luxury properties and exclusive commercial spaces. His mother, Diane, was from an old East Coast family, the kind with their name on university buildings. Brandon worked as an executive in his father's company, with plans to take over someday. Their first date was at a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices. Their second was a helicopter tour of the city. By the time I met him a month later, Sophia was already smitten. I prepared my best pot roast, cleaned the house until it shined, and wore my nicest dress, still nothing compared to Brandon's casual designer outfit. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Martinez," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes as he glanced around our modest home. "Sophia talks about you constantly." He was polite enough throughout dinner, complimenting my cooking and asking questions about my nursing career. But I noticed how he subtly steered the conversation back to himself and how his tone changed when discussing people he considered beneath him. Still, he made Sophia laugh in a way I hadn't seen since before her father died. So I pushed my reservations aside. Over the next 2 years, I saw Sophia transform. She began wearing more expensive clothes, changed her hairstyle, even adopted some of Brandon's opinions as her own. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent, often cancelled because Brandon had made surprise plans. When we did meet, she spent much of the time talking about Brandon's family connections or their latest exotic trip. When they announced their engagement 8 months ago with a diamond ring that made me gasp, my feelings were mixed. I plastered a smile on my face and hugged them both, of course. Sophia was radiant with happiness, and that's what mattered most. But a small voice inside wondered if Brandon truly saw my daughter for the amazing woman she was, or if she was just another acquisition for his perfect life portrait. "I want to contribute to the wedding," I told Sophia privately after the engagement dinner at the Sullivans' sprawling mansion. We sat in my kitchen drinking tea like we used to when she was younger. "Mom, you don't have to do that. Brandon's parents insist on covering everything," she said, though I could see uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm your mother, sweetheart. I've been saving for your wedding since you were a little girl twirling around in princess dresses." What I didn't say was that I'd been putting aside a little from every paycheck for 15 years, skipping vacations and buying second-hand clothes, accumulating $60,000 that was meant to give my daughter her dream day. "Are you sure it's a lot of money?" Sophia whispered, knowing the sacrifices behind that sum. "Absolutely sure," I said, squeezing her hand. "This is what your father would have wanted too." What I didn't realize then was that my $60,000, my life savings, would be just a drop in the bucket of what the Sullivans considered a proper wedding. And that my contribution, substantial as it was to me, would not buy me a voice in what was to come. The wedding planning began with excitement and anticipation. Sophia asked me to go with her to look at potential venues, and I took a rare day off from the hospital to join her. We visited 3 beautiful locations that I thought were breathtaking: a renovated historic theatre, a botanical garden with a glass pavilion, and a charming vineyard in the countryside. Sophia seemed to love them all, especially the vineyard where her eyes lit up as she imagined an evening ceremony among the grape arbors. But when Brandon joined us for the second round of visits, he dismissed all 3 options with casual disdain. "These are nice for certain types of weddings," he said, scrolling through his phone as we stood in the beautiful garden pavilion. "But they're a bit common, don't you think?" Instead, he took us to Lakeside Manor, an ultra-exclusive resort where celebrities and politicians held their events. The sales director greeted Brandon by name, mentioning how they had hosted his cousin's wedding the previous year. As we toured the marble-floored ballrooms and manicured grounds, the director casually mentioned pricing that made me feel faint: $150,000 for the venue and basic catering alone. "It's perfect," Brandon declared, not bothering to ask either Sophia or me for our opinions. "My parents will be pleased." Sophia looked torn, but nodded along. Later, when I gently asked if she really preferred this over the vineyard, she said, "Brandon thinks presentation is important for his family's business relationships. Many of the guests will be potential clients." That was my first indication that this wedding might not be primarily about Sophia and Brandon's love story. The planning meetings that followed established a pattern. I would attend offer suggestions and watch as Brandon or his mother Diane would override them. The first time it happened was during the discussion about flowers. "My mother grew the most beautiful hydrangeas," I said, showing a photo from my own wedding. "Sophia used to say she wanted the same blue flowers when she got married someday." "Hydrangeas are so pedestrian," Diane replied with a dismissive wave. "We're thinking imported peonies and orchids. Our florist did all of the governor's inaugural events." Sophia gave me an apologetic glance, but said nothing. The guest list became another source of tension. When I submitted my list of 30 people, close friends, colleagues who had helped raise Sophia, and a few relatives, Brandon frowned as he reviewed it. "Do all these hospital people really need to be invited? The governor and 2 state senators will be attending. The guest list is already at 300. These are people who have been part of Sophia's life since childhood," I explained. "Maria was there for her first steps when I was working. Carlos and his wife took her to soccer practice for 3 years when my car broke down." "How quaint," Diane murmured to her husband, not quite under her breath. Brandon eventually agreed to include my guests, but later I discovered they had been assigned to the furthest tables from the main party, practically in another room. As weeks passed, Sophia changed under Brandon's influence. The daughter who once laughed easily became anxious about every detail, meeting the Sullivan standard. She worried about her dress, her speech, whether her friends from college would know which fork to use. Several times I found her in tears after phone calls with Brandon's mother. "Maybe we should simplify," I suggested one evening, 6 weeks before the wedding date. "Focus on what makes you and Brandon happy rather than impressing everyone." "You don't understand, Mom," she snapped, uncharacteristically sharp. "This isn't just a personal celebration. It's about joining families, establishing connections. Brandon's father has invited clients who could sign multi-million-dollar contracts based on the impression we make." I backed off, hurt by her tone, but more concerned that my daughter's wedding had somehow transformed into a business networking event. The breaking point of the planning phase came during the menu tasting. The chef had prepared 6 different options for the main course, each more elaborate than anything I'd ever eaten at a wedding. When I mentioned that the herb-crusted salmon was delicious, Brandon and his parents exchanged glances. "We'll go with the imported Kobe beef and the duck confit options," Brandon's father announced, ignoring my comment entirely. "Most of our guests have sophisticated palates." Later, I overheard Brandon telling Sophia, "Honey, maybe your mom should focus on the rehearsal dinner details instead. Something more, in her comfort zone." I pretended not to hear, swallowing my pride for Sophia's sake. But that night I called Maria and finally voiced my growing concerns. "I feel like I'm losing her, Maria. Like she's becoming someone I don't recognize to fit into their world." "Have you talked to her?" Maria asked. "Really talked to her?" I tried the next day, asking Sophia if she was truly happy with how things were progressing. "Everything's fine, Mom," she insisted, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested otherwise. "The Sullivans know how these things should be done. I just want everything to be perfect." "Perfect for whom?" I asked gently. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Brandon says this wedding is laying the foundation for our future. His father is considering us for the new development project, if everything goes well." I realized then that the wedding had become transactional, a demonstration of the Sullivan family's wealth and influence, and a test of whether Sophia could fulfill her role in their dynasty. My daughter, who once dreamed of changing the world through ethical marketing campaigns, was now focused on impressing people she didn't even know. And I, despite contributing a sum that represented decades of sacrifice, had been relegated to the role of spectator in what should have been one of the most meaningful days of both our lives. As the wedding date grew closer, the division between Sophia's old life and her new one with Brandon became increasingly apparent. 3 months before the ceremony, I noticed that my calls often went to voicemail, and our conversations became shorter and more superficial when we did speak. Sophia seemed constantly stressed, rushing from meetings with vendors to events with Brandon's family and friends. The incident at the food tasting was just the beginning. During the floral arrangement preview, the designer presented several options, including a stunning centerpiece with blue hydrangeas I had suggested as a nod to my wedding with Sophia's father. "Oh, we can't use those," Brandon said with a laugh. "My mother thinks they look like something from a roadside diner. We'll go with the all-white arrangement with gold accents." Sophia looked at me apologetically, but remained silent. I noticed how she twisted her engagement ring nervously, something she did when uncomfortable. The designer quickly removed the blue arrangement, giving me a sympathetic glance. That evening, I met Maria for coffee at our favorite diner. The contrast between the simple comfort of the vinyl booths and the opulence of the wedding planning sessions couldn't have been starker. "I don't know who my daughter is becoming," I confessed, stirring my coffee absently. Yesterday, she actually corrected my pronunciation of the appetizer name in front of the caterer. The look she gave me, it was like she was embarrassed by me. Maria reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Have you considered that maybe this isn't the right match for her? From everything you've told me, this Brandon fellow and his family sound elitist, condescending, obsessed with status, I supplied. I was going to say, like huge jerks, but your description works too, Maria said with a gentle smile. The question is, does Sophia see it? I shook my head. I think she's so caught up in it all, the glamour, the excitement, the feeling of being accepted into their world. When I try to talk to her about it, she gets defensive. And she did when I carefully broached the subject the next day, asking if she was truly happy with how the wedding plans were evolving. Why can't you just be supportive, Mom? Sophia snapped. Brandon and his family know how these events should be handled. They move in circles, we don't. The we stung more than I cared to admit, as if she was acknowledging that I would never belong in her new life. As the weeks passed, Brandon's family took over more aspects of the wedding planning. The Sullivans hired a new wedding planner without consulting me, one who frequently handled celebrity events and clearly viewed me as an irrelevant party in the proceedings. Mrs. Martinez, she would say with practiced patience, the mother of the bride traditionally focuses on the rehearsal dinner and bridal shower. Perhaps you could direct your suggestions to those events. Even those were gradually taken from my purview. Diane Sullivan decided the rehearsal dinner should be at her country club rather than the Italian restaurant I had suggested, where Sophia had celebrated her college graduation. We have an image to maintain, she explained when Sophia relayed the change to me. Many of our friends will be expecting a certain standard. I began to feel like an outsider, despite my financial contribution. When I asked about the status of my $60,000, I was told it had been deposited into the general wedding account controlled by the wedding planner. My internal struggle intensified. Should I speak up more forcefully? Risk creating tension that might affect Sophia's big day? Or continue to swallow my hurt for her sake? The answer came unexpectedly during a meeting with Brandon's parents at their home to discuss final arrangements. Their mansion made my comfortable but modest home look like a servant's quarters by comparison. Every surface gleamed with luxury, crystal vases, original artwork furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. We're so pleased Sophia will be joining our family, Thomas Sullivan said as we sat in their living room. She's adapted remarkably well considering her humble background. Thomas, his wife admonished lightly, though her smile suggested she shared his sentiment. I only meant it as a compliment, he continued. Some people never manage to rise above their origins. Sophia has shown real potential. I sat there, teacup frozen, halfway to my lips, as they discussed my daughter, as if she were a rescue pet who had surprisingly good manners. In that moment, I understood that no matter how much Sophia changed, no matter how well she performed in their world, they would always see her, and by extension me, as fundamentally inferior. What broke my heart further was noticing changes in how Sophia treated her longtime friends. Amanda, her roommate from college, and once her closest confidant, was no longer in the bridal party. When I asked why, Sophia mumbled something about different directions in life. The final blow came when Sophia cancelled our traditional mother-daughter spa day scheduled for the week before the wedding, something we had been planning for months. I'm so sorry, Mom, she said over the phone, sounding rushed. Diane has arranged for us to meet the designer who made my dress. He's flying in specially and can only do that day. But we always said we'd spend that day together, I protested gently. It's been our tradition since your high school prom. This is important, Mum, she replied, an edge to her voice. You understand, right? We can do the spa another time. But I knew there wouldn't be another time. The wedding was consuming everything, changing everything. Most of all, my relationship with my only child. As I hung up the phone, I felt a heaviness in my chest, a growing certainty that things would never be the same again. Still, I continued smiling when we met, offering help where it was permitted, and trying to focus on Sophia's happiness rather than my own hurt. If this was the life she wanted, the family she chose to join, who was I to stand in her way? I had raised her to make her own choices after all. But in my quieter moments alone in my house with photos of Sophia growing up surrounding me, I couldn't help but wonder if she was truly making this choice freely, or if she was being sculpted into someone else entirely, someone who might eventually look back at her former life and her mother with the same condescension the Sullivans had perfected. The week before the wedding arrived with a flurry of last-minute details and mounting tension. I had taken time off from the hospital to help however I could, though increasingly it seemed there was little role for me beyond showing up when and where I was directed. The seating chart for the reception became the catalyst for what would follow. I stopped by the wedding planner's office to drop off the final RSVP cards from my friends and noticed the large display board with table assignments. Curious, I looked for my name and was surprised to find myself seated at table 23 in the far corner of the ballroom behind a large column with people I didn't recognize. "There must be some mistake," I said to the wedding planner, Sarah. "I'm the mother of the bride. Shouldn't I be at the family table?" Sarah looked uncomfortable. "The head table is for the bride and groom, the best man maid of honor, and the Sullivan parents," she explained. Mr. Sullivan was quite specific about the arrangements. "And what about my friends, the people who have known Sophia her entire life?" I asked, scanning the chart further. "They're at tables 24 and 25, she said, pointing to tables that appeared to be in an entirely separate area, almost in an alcove off the main ballroom. I left the office in a daze and called Sophia immediately. When I explained what I had discovered, her response left me cold. "Mom, please don't make this difficult. The seating was really complicated with all the protocol about who can sit with whom. Brandon's father has business associates who need to be at prominent tables." "More prominent than your mother?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not like that," she insisted, though we both knew it was exactly like that. "It's just one dinner. Please for me." I agreed, of course. What else could I do? But something had shifted inside me. A realization that in the world Sophia was entering, I would always be an afterthought, an inconvenience to be managed. Later that day, I went to Sophia's apartment to deliver the pearl earrings that had been my mother's, something old for her to wear. I had a key, and Sophia knew I was coming, but she was in the shower when I arrived. As I set the small box on her dresser, I heard voices from the living room. Brandon was on the phone, his voice carrying clearly down the hallway. "No, we've handled it," he was saying. "She won't make a scene. Sophia has her under control." "Yes, we put all her embarrassing friends in the back, where they won't bother anyone important. God, can you imagine them trying to make conversation with the Johnsons or the Wilsons? It would be a disaster." He laughed, then a sound that made my stomach clench. "Don't worry. Once we're married, Sophia will see her less and less. We'll do holidays at your house, weekend trips with your friends. The occasional obligation lunch to keep the peace, that's all." Of course I love her. That doesn't mean I want to adopt her background. I stood frozen the truth of how my future son-in-law saw me, how he planned to gradually remove my daughter from my life, washing over me in waves of pain. I slipped out before either of them knew I was there, the pearl earrings left behind on the dresser. That evening, alone in my house, I pulled out old photo albums. Pictures of Sophia as a toddler, taking her first steps as a gap-toothed elementary student, proudly holding science fair ribbons as a teenager, heading to prom. In each photo, I could see her father's smile, his kind eyes. What would Peter think of the man his daughter had chosen? What would he say about how I'd been treated? The next evening was the rehearsal dinner at the Sullivans' Country Club. I wore a navy blue dress I had purchased, specially spending more than I normally would on clothing. I had my hair done professionally and even splurged on a makeup session. If I was going to be scrutinized by the Sullivans' social circle, I wanted to hold my head high. The dinner began pleasantly enough with champagne and passed hors d'oeuvres in a room overlooking the golf course. I stuck close to Maria, who had been invited as a courtesy to me, both of us feeling distinctly out of place among the designer dresses and casual displays of wealth. During dinner, Thomas Sullivan stood to make a toast. He spoke eloquently about Brandon's achievements, about the Sullivan legacy, and then, almost as an afterthought, about Sophia. "We're pleased to welcome Sophia into our family," he said, raising his glass. "She's proven herself adaptable and eager to embrace our traditions. With Brandon's guidance, I'm sure she'll continue to flourish." Polite applause followed. Then Brandon rose for his own toast. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect," he said, smiling at the assembled guests. "Every detail has been arranged to showcase the beginning of our journey together. Of course," he added with a chuckle, looking in my direction, "we've had to make a few adjustments along the way to ensure the right tone. Thank goodness Sophia was willing to override some of the more quaint suggestions from her side." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Sophia's smile became fixed, her eyes darting nervously between Brandon and me. "To a wedding worthy of the Sullivan name," Brandon concluded, raising his glass. I sat stunned as the guests applauded. The public humiliation delivered with such casual cruelty left me breathless. Maria squeezed my hand under the table, her face reflecting the anger I couldn't express. "Let's get some air," she whispered, and we slipped out to the terrace while dessert was being served. "That entitled little—" Maria fumed once we were alone. "Inez, how can you let him speak to you that way? How can Sophia allow it?" I had no answer. The realization that my daughter had not defended me had sat silently while I was mocked, cut deeper than Brandon's words. I made an excuse about not feeling well and left early, unable to maintain the facade any longer. Sophia texted an hour later. "Are you okay? You didn't say goodbye." I replied that I was just tired and looking forward to tomorrow. It was easier than telling the truth. Then at 8:30 the next evening, less than 12 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, my phone rang. It was Brandon. "Inez." He began using my first name, though he usually called me Mrs. Martinez. "I'm calling about a last-minute adjustment to the guest list." "What kind of adjustment?" I asked, a sense of dread building. "Well, we've been going over the final numbers, and we've had some last-minute acceptances from important clients of my father's. Space at the main reception is becoming an issue." "I see," I said, though I didn't yet. "So we've been looking at who might not be essential to have at the main event," he continued. "Those hospital friends of yours. What were their names? Maria and Carlos, and the others." "What about them?" My voice had gone very quiet. "We're thinking they could attend just the ceremony, but not the reception. Or perhaps we could arrange a separate celebration for them another time. Somewhere more appropriate for their tastes." "You want to uninvite my friends?" "The people who helped raise Sophia." I was struggling to control my tone. "Let's be realistic," Brandon said, his voice hardening. "We only want important people at our wedding, people who matter in the circles we'll be moving in. It's nothing personal." The words hung in the air between us, their meaning crystal clear. I and everyone connected to me were not important. We did not matter. "Sophia agrees with this," I managed to ask. "She understands that sacrifices need to be made. It's really about Sophia and me, not you. I'm sure as her mother you want what's best for her future." In that moment, something inside me, perhaps the last thread of hope that things would somehow work out, finally snapped. "I see," I said again, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "Thank you for letting me know. So you'll call your friends, tell them there's been a change." "I'll take care of it," I promised. "Excellent. See you tomorrow then." I hung up the phone, said nothing, and sat in my living room as the full impact of Brandon's words washed over me. Then, with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, I reached for my phone again and made a few quiet calls that would change everything. The living room clock ticked loudly in the silence of my house. It was almost 9 in the evening, less than 12 hours before my daughter was supposed to walk down the aisle. The room was dark, except for a single lamp casting long shadows across the family photos that lined my walls. Pictures of Sophia growing up. Pictures of Peter and me on our wedding day. A simple, joyful celebration that had cost less than what the Sullivans were spending on flowers alone. In those photos, we looked happy, authentic, surrounded by people who truly cared about us, not business connections evaluating our worth. Brandon's words echoed in my head. We only want important people at our wedding. Important people. As if the value of a guest could be measured by their bank account or social connections, rather than their love for the bride and groom. As if my friends, who had held my hand at Peter's funeral, who had helped raise my daughter, who had celebrated every milestone in Sophia's life, were somehow unworthy of witnessing her marriage. As if I myself was barely worthy of being there. In that moment of painful clarity, I realized I had been financing a wedding where neither I nor anyone I cared about was truly welcome. $60,000, money that represented years of double shifts of going without, of careful saving, was being used to create an event designed to impress people who looked down on me and would eventually try to separate me from my daughter. I didn't make the decision in anger, though anger certainly simmered beneath the surface. Instead, it was a moment of quiet dignity, of reclaiming the self-respect I had gradually surrendered throughout the wedding planning process. My first call was to my bank. Despite the late hour, my banker David was still working. We had known each other for years. He had helped me set up Sophia's college fund, advised me on the home equity loan, and assisted with my retirement planning. David! I need to discuss the wedding account I set up for Sophia. I began my voice steadier than I expected. Of course, Inez. What can I help with? When I created the joint account with the wedding planner, what were the withdrawal terms? I asked. Let me check, he said, and I heard computer keys clicking. It's a standard joint account. Either party can make deposits or withdrawals without the other's approval. So I could withdraw my contribution. My heart was pounding as I asked. Yes, you could, but is everything okay, Inez? The wedding is tomorrow, isn't it? I took a deep breath. David, I need to withdraw my funds from that account. All $60,000. There was a pause. I can process that, but it would have to be a cashier's check or a transfer to another account. We can't do cash for that amount, especially after hours. A transfer to my personal account would be fine, I said. Inez. David said gently, I've known you for 15 years. This doesn't seem like something you'd do lightly. Are you sure about this? I explained the situation, the gradual exclusion, Brandon's call, the clear message that I and my loved ones didn't belong. As I spoke, my resolve strengthened. They've made it clear that my contribution doesn't buy me respect, or even basic courtesy, I concluded. I can't finance an event where I'm treated like an embarrassment. David was silent for a moment. I understand, he finally said. I'll process the transfer now. It should be completed within the hour. My second call was to Thomas, not Brandon's father, but my friend Thomas Jackson, who had been a lawyer for 30 years. We had met when his wife was my patient during her battle with cancer. Though she ultimately lost that fight, Thomas had remained a friend, occasionally seeking my nursing advice for his teenage daughters. Inez, is everything all right? He answered, concern in his voice at the late call. I need some quick legal advice, I said, explaining what I had just done. Well, he said when I finished, since it was a joint account with your name on it, you had every legal right to withdraw your own funds. It wasn't a gift yet. No formal contract stating the money was irrevocably given. You might face some angry people tomorrow, but legally, you're on solid ground. Thank you, Thomas, I said, relief washing over me. I needed to be sure. For what it's worth, he added. From what you've told me about this family, Sophia might be dodging a bullet if this wedding doesn't happen. My third call was to Maria. Despite the hour, she answered immediately. Something's wrong, she said instead of hello. I can hear it in your voice. I told her everything. Brandon's call, my decision, the bank transfer. By the end, I was finally crying the emotions I had suppressed for months, breaking free. Oh, honey, Maria said softly. You did the right thing. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not by family. But Sophia, I began. Sophia needs to see who she's really marrying, Maria said firmly. Better a cancelled wedding than a miserable marriage and a lifetime of watching her mother be disrespected. I need your help, I said, wiping my tears. Can you contact Carlos and everyone else from the hospital? Tell them there's been a change of plans, but don't give details. I don't want this turning into gossip before Sophia knows. Of course, Maria promised. And Inez, I'm proud of you. It takes courage to stand up for yourself, especially when it might hurt someone you love. My final call of the night was to Sarah, the wedding planner. I had her personal cell number from our earlier communications. It was almost 10:30 by then, and I half expected to reach her voicemail. Instead, she answered on the third ring, sounding tired. Mrs. Martinez, is everything okay? No, Sarah, it isn't, I said honestly. I need to inform you that I've withdrawn my contribution from the wedding account. There was a moment of stunned silence. You... What? But the wedding is tomorrow. We've already paid most of the vendors. I understand, and I'm sorry for the position this puts you in, I said. But after the conversation I had with Brandon this evening, I can no longer in good conscience contribute to this event. I explained what had happened. To my surprise, Sarah's tone softened. I suspected something wasn't right, she admitted. The way they've been treating you throughout this process. It isn't normal, Mrs. Martinez. Most families I work with honor the mother of the bride, regardless of who's paying. What will happen now? I asked. Honestly, there will be some chaos. The venue requires full payment by morning, or they won't open the doors. Some vendors might still perform if they've received deposits, but others will pull out. I'll need to contact the Sullivans immediately. I understand. Again, I apologize for involving you in this. Don't, she said firmly. Some things are more important than a fancy wedding. Your dignity is one of them. As I hung up the phone, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, freed from the burden of pretending everything was fine, but weighed down by what would happen in the morning. I didn't call Sophia. This wasn't news to deliver over the phone, and I needed time to prepare for her reaction. Instead, I went to bed lying awake for hours as I replayed Brandon's words and imagined the chaos that would unfold tomorrow. Part of me wanted to reverse my decision to avoid the pain that would surely come. But a stronger part, the part that had raised a daughter alone and built a life from the ashes of widowhood, knew that sometimes love means standing your ground even when it hurts. Eventually, I fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of Sophia as a little girl, asking me to protect her from monsters under the bed. In the dream, I promised her I always would, even when the monster wore an expensive suit and offered her the world in exchange for her soul. The ringing of my phone jolted me awake at 7:15 in the morning, the day my daughter was supposed to get married. Sophia's name flashed on the screen, and I took a deep breath before answering. Mom! Her voice was shrill, panicked. What did you do? The venue just called Brandon's parents. They said our account is short $60,000, and they won't open the doors unless the balance is paid in full within the hour. I sat up, my heart racing despite my resolve. I withdrew my contribution, Sophia. You what? Why would you? How could you do this today of all days? Her voice cracked with emotion, shock, confusion, and rising anger. I need to explain in person, I said calmly. Where are you? I'm at the hotel with the bridesmaids. We were about to start hair and makeup. Mom, please tell me this is some kind of mistake. It's not a mistake. I'll be there in 20 minutes. We need to talk. You, me, and Brandon. Brandon is furious, she whispered. His father is threatening to sue you. They can threaten all they want, I said, surprised by my own steadiness. I'll see you soon. I dressed quickly in a simple blue dress, not the mother of the bride outfit hanging in my closet, and drove to the hotel. My mind was clear, my purpose certain. This wasn't about ruining Sophia's wedding. It was about standing up for my worth and hopefully opening her eyes to the man she was about to marry. The scene at the hotel suite was chaotic. Bridesmaids in matching robes huddled in corners, whispering and casting worried glances my way as I entered. The makeup artist and hairstylist stood awkwardly with their equipment, clearly unsure whether to continue working. And in the center of it all was Sophia, still in her pajamas. Tears streaming down her face as she argued with Brandon on the phone. She's here now, she said, looking up as I entered. We'll figure this out. Yes, I know what time it is. She hung up and stared at me, her expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. How could you do this to me? Before I could answer, the door burst open again, and Brandon strode in, followed by his parents. Thomas Sullivan's face was flushed with anger. Diane's pinched with disdain. You? Brandon pointed at me, his carefully cultivated charm nowhere in evidence. Do you have any idea what you've done? The venue won't let in the setup crew. The florist is threatening to take back the arrangements. It's a disaster. Brandon, I acknowledged with a nod. I was just about to explain to Sophia. Explain what? He demanded. How you decided to sabotage your only daughter's wedding. How you're trying to ruin the most important day of her life. I turned to Sophia, ignoring him. Last night, Brandon called me. He told me that my friends, the people who helped raise you, who loved you your entire life, weren't welcome at the reception because they weren't important enough. His exact words were, "We only want important people at our wedding." Sophia's eyes widened. She turned to Brandon. What? You said the guest list reduction was because of space constraints. It is about space, he insisted, but his tone had changed. We had last-minute RSVPs from people who matter to my father's business. Who matter more than my mother's closest friends? The people who are practically family to me. Sophia's voice was quiet, but intense. Be realistic, Sophia, Thomas Sullivan interjected. This wedding is an investment in your future. Connections made today could secure your and Brandon's position for decades. Some sacrifices are necessary. Sacrifices, I repeated, meeting his gaze. Like my dignity. Like being seated behind a column at my only daughter's wedding. Like watching Sophia slowly transform into someone who's embarrassed by her own mother. No one said anything about being embarrassed, Brandon protested, but his eyes shifted away. You didn't have to say it. You showed it in 1,000 ways, I replied. And last night, when you made it crystal clear that I and everyone connected to me were not important people, I finally understood what my $60,000 was buying, a front-row seat to my daughter's absorption into a family that will never truly accept her roots or respect her mother. The room had gone silent, all eyes moving between Brandon, Sophia, and me. So yes, I withdrew my contribution, I continued. Money that represented 15 years of sacrifice. Money that I'd saved by working extra shifts and going without so that Sophia could have her dream day. But this, I gestured around the luxurious suite, isn't her dream, it's yours. A showcase for the Sullivan family wealth and connections where the bride's mother is an inconvenient footnote. Diane Sullivan stepped forward, her expression cold. This is preposterous. We've been nothing but welcoming to Sophia. As long as she plays by your rules, I countered. As long as she distances herself from her past, from me. This is absurd, Brandon scoffed. Sophia, tell your mother she's being ridiculous. We need to fix this now. The wedding starts in 5 hours. All eyes turned to Sophia, who stood very still looking between us. I could see the struggle on her face, the desire to please Brandon, to become part of his world warring with the recognition of hard truths in my words. Is it true? She finally asked Brandon. Did you really tell my mother that we only want important people at our wedding? Brandon hesitated, and in that pause I saw Sophia's expression change. Answer me, she insisted. I was trying to manage a difficult situation, he began. Your mother is taking my words out of context. What context makes that okay? Sophia's voice rose. These are people I've known my entire life. People who took care of me while Mom worked double shifts after Dad died. How are they not important? Look! Thomas Sullivan cut in. This is all very dramatic, but we have a more pressing issue. The venue won't proceed without full payment. I'll handle it for now, and we can discuss reimbursement later. He pulled out his phone, presumably to arrange a transfer. No, Brandon said, stopping his father. Why should we pay for this? It's her fault, he jabbed a finger toward me. She should be responsible for the additional costs. Brandon, please, Sophia pleaded. Let's just fix this and get through today. No, he repeated more forcefully. I'm not spending another $60,000 because your mother decided to have some kind of last-minute emotional breakdown. If she wants the wedding to happen, she can put the money back. A tense silence followed. I said nothing, waiting for Sophia to see what was happening. That when pressed, Brandon's true priorities emerged. So what are you saying? Sophia finally asked, her voice small. That if my mother doesn't put the money back, there's no wedding. Brandon ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, visibly frustrated. I'm saying we could postpone. Reschedule once this mess is sorted out. Postpone my wedding day because of money, when your family has 10 times that amount in your checking account. Sophia's voice gained strength. Or is it because without all the expensive flowers and champagne and those imported orchids your mother insisted on, it won't be impressive enough for your business associates? Don't be naive, Sophia, he snapped. Of course appearance matters. Everything about this wedding was designed to establish our place in society. Now it's going to look like some budget disaster. And there it was, the truth laid bare. Not a word about love or commitment or building a life together. Just concern for appearances, for what important people would think. I watched as the realization dawned across my daughter's face. The man she thought she knew, the future she had imagined dissolving before her eyes. I see, Sophia said quietly. Then looking directly at Brandon, she added, You know what, my mother's right. This isn't my dream wedding. It never was. What are you talking about? Brandon demanded. We've spent months planning every detail. No, you and your parents planned every detail, Sophia corrected. I just went along with it because I thought that's what love meant. Compromise, adaptation. But it's been all one way, hasn't it? Me changing to fit your world. Me distancing myself from the people who love me. Me watching my mother be treated like she doesn't matter. You're being emotional, Diane cut in dismissively. Every bride gets jitters. This isn't jitters, Sophia said firmly. This is clarity. For the first time in months, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. She turned to me, tears in her eyes, but determination in her voice. Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been blind. Letting them make you feel unwelcome, letting them change me into someone I don't recognize. Sophia, please. Brandon started, his tone softening as he realized what was happening. We can work this out. I'll call the venue, arrange payment. We can have the wedding just as planned. It's not about the money anymore, she said, shaking her head. It's about what I just heard, what I've been hearing, but refusing to acknowledge for months. She twisted the enormous diamond ring off her finger and held it out to Brandon. I can't marry someone who thinks my mother and the people who raised me aren't important enough to attend my wedding. You cannot be serious, Brandon sputtered, not taking the ring. You're throwing away everything we've built over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Sophia repeated. You just said our wedding was designed to establish our place in society, not to celebrate our love or commitment. Tell me, Brandon, if all the flowers and champagne and fancy table settings disappeared, would you still want to marry me today, in a simple ceremony with just the people who truly care about us? Brandon's hesitation was answer enough. That's what I thought, Sophia said sadly. Thomas Sullivan stepped forward, his business instincts taking over. Let's all calm down. Clearly there's been a miscommunication. We can reschedule for another date, perhaps reassess some of the arrangements. No, Sophia said with finality. There won't be another date. As if on cue, a knock came at the door. A frazzled-looking young man in the venue's uniform stood there with a clipboard. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to speak with the bride or groom urgently. We've had calls from guests arriving early, but we've been instructed not to open the doors without the remaining payment. Reality crashed in. 300 guests would soon be arriving to a locked venue. The wedding that had consumed our lives for months was unraveling in real time. Tell them the wedding is cancelled, Sophia said, her voice breaking, but resolute. Cancelled, the young man echoed, looking horrified. Yes, Sophia confirmed. Please inform anyone who arrives. I take full responsibility. The room erupted into chaos after the venue representative left. Brandon's parents were furious, alternating between blaming me and trying to convince Sophia to reconsider. Brandon himself veered between anger and desperate attempts to change Sophia's mind. You're making a terrible mistake, he told her. All this because your mother couldn't accept her place. My place, I finally spoke up. And what place is that exactly, Brandon? You know exactly what I mean. He spat, his careful veneer completely gone. Sophia had a chance to rise above where she came from, to join a family with real standing, real influence. And now she's throwing it all away because you filled her head with nonsense about respect and importance. I'd rather be the nobody daughter of a nobody mother, Sophia said quietly, than the wife of a man who measures people's worth by their bank accounts and social connections. Brandon's face contorted with anger. Fine. Good luck going back to your pathetic little life with Nurse Mom. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away. He stormed out, his parents following after throwing venomous glances our way. The door slammed behind them, leaving Sophia and me standing in the sudden quiet of the suite, surrounded by confused bridesmaids and abandoned wedding preparations. Sophia looked at me, her expression a mixture of grief and relief. What have I done, Mom? I crossed the room and took her hands in mine. You've chosen truth over illusion, sweetheart. It hurts now, but trust me, it would have hurt far more years down the road. She fell into my arms, then sobbing as the full weight of the day's events washed over her. I held her, stroking her hair, as I had when she was a little girl, with scraped knees or a broken heart. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I let them treat you terribly. I didn't stand up for you. You're standing up now, I told her. That's what matters. Together we faced the daunting task of informing guests that the wedding was cancelled. Some had already arrived at the venue, dressed in their finest clothes, bearing expensive gifts. The whispers and speculations spread quickly. Brandon's family was nowhere to be seen, having left the explanation, and the embarrassment, entirely to Sophia and me. But as we stood together outside the venue, greeting confused and concerned guests, something unexpected happened. Person after person expressed not disappointment or judgment, but support. I always thought he was a bit full of himself, Sophia's college roommate whispered as she hugged her. You deserve someone who appreciates where you come from. Not just where they want to take you, said my colleague Carlos, who had known Sophia since she was 10. Even some of Brandon's relatives approached discreetly. I was in a marriage like that for 20 years, his aunt confided to Sophia. Trust me, you've saved yourself decades of feeling inadequate. What had begun as a moment of crisis transformed gradually and imperfectly into a strange kind of affirmation. By standing up for what mattered, respect genuine connection, the honor of being valued for who you are, rather than what you represent, Sophia and I found ourselves surrounded by the truly important people in our lives. Not the governor or the state senators or the business magnates on Brandon's guest list, but the people who had loved us through our best and worst moments. The people who would continue to stand by us long after the drama of this day faded into memory. As the sun set on what should have been Sophia's wedding day, we sat in my backyard with Maria Carlos and a few other close friends who had insisted on coming over. Someone ordered pizza. Someone else brought wine. We laughed, we cried. We began the process of making sense of what had happened. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow, Sophia admitted, leaning her head against my shoulder. Everything I planned for the next year involved Brandon. Our honeymoon moving into his condo, working for his father's company. Tomorrow, I told her, you'll wake up and breathe, and then the next day you'll breathe again. And slowly you'll rebuild, not the life Brandon was designing for you, but a life that truly reflects who you are and what you value. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm glad you made those calls, Mum. I'm glad you showed me the truth before it was too late. As our friends talked around us, the cancelled wedding no longer seemed like the disaster it had appeared that morning. Instead, it felt like a narrow escape, a painful but necessary redirection toward a more authentic path. The $60,000 that had briefly thrown everything into chaos now seemed like the best investment I'd ever made. Not in a wedding, but in my daughter's chance at genuine happiness. In the opportunity for her to find someone who would cherish not just her, but the family and history that made her who she was. Some prices I realized were too high to pay even for a dream wedding. And some things, self-respect, dignity, being valued for who you truly are, were simply not for sale at any price. The days following what should have been Sophia's wedding were a blur of practical challenges and emotional reckonings. There were gifts to return, deposits forfeited, and endless explanations to be made. But beneath the logistical chaos ran a current of something unexpected: healing. The morning after the cancelled wedding, I found Sophia sitting at my kitchen table, at dawn, cup of coffee in hand, staring out the window. She had spent the night in her old bedroom, unable to face returning to the apartment she had shared with Brandon. I couldn't sleep, she said as I joined her. I keep replaying everything in my mind, the way Brandon looked at me when I gave back the ring, the things he said. That's natural, I told her, pouring my own coffee. You're grieving not just the relationship, but the future you thought you would have. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. The worst part is, I let them change me. I started seeing you through their eyes, as someone to be managed, someone who didn't quite fit. My own mother, who gave up everything for me. Her voice broke. How could I do that? I reached across the table and took her hand. We all get lost sometimes, sweetheart, especially when we desperately want to belong somewhere. You're not the first person to lose sight of yourself while trying to become what someone else wanted. But I hurt you in the process. I let them disrespect you again and again. And now you see it, I said gently. That's what matters. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it. Over the next week, Sophia and I worked together to untangle the aftermath of the cancelled wedding. She wrote heartfelt notes to accompany the returned gifts, not hiding the truth, but not dwelling on it either. The wedding has been cancelled. I apologize for any inconvenience, and thank you for your understanding during this difficult time. Some people, of course, wanted more details. The phone rang constantly with concerned friends and curious acquaintances. Brandon's family had apparently crafted their own narrative, that Sophia had suffered a nervous breakdown and that I had manipulated her into calling off the wedding out of jealousy. Let them say what they want, I advised when Sophia heard these rumors. People who matter know the truth. Surprisingly, many of the wedding guests reached out with messages of support rather than judgment. Several of Sophia's friends from college and her workplace confessed they had always felt uncomfortable around Brandon, but hadn't wanted to say anything. He would talk differently when you weren't around, her friend Jennifer admitted over coffee, making these subtle comments about elevating you and polishing you. We didn't know how to tell you. Even more revealing were the insights that came from mutual acquaintances who had seen Brandon's behavior in contexts Sophia hadn't. At the Christmas party last year, when you were talking with my wife, I overheard Brandon and his father discussing you like you were some kind of acquisition, her co-worker Michael told her. Thomas said something like, "She'll bring fresh blood to the family line," and Brandon agreed. It gave me chills. Each revelation was painful but clarifying. The man Sophia had fallen in love with, or thought she had, existed primarily in her imagination, shaped by her hopes and his careful performance. The real Brandon had been visible all along to those not blinded by his charm and status. Brandon himself made several attempts to win Sophia back. First came the angry texts demanding she come to her senses. When those went unanswered, flowers arrived at her workplace, extravagant arrangements with cards expressing regret for the misunderstanding. When Sophia remained firm in her decision, his approach changed again. He appeared at my door one evening, unannounced. "I need to speak with Sophia," he demanded when I answered. "She's not here," I said truthfully. She had moved temporarily to Maria's guest house while looking for a new apartment, wanting space to process everything. "I don't believe you," he said, trying to look past me into the house. "This ridiculous situation has gone on long enough. We had a disagreement, but throwing away our entire future over it is insane." "A disagreement," I repeated. "Is that what you call telling the mother of the bride that her friends aren't important enough to attend the wedding? Or suggesting that your family's business connections matter more than people who have loved Sophia her entire life?" His expression hardened. "You know this is exactly the problem. You never understood how the real world works. In our circles, your circles," I corrected, "not Sophia's and certainly not mine." "She wanted to be part of those circles," he insisted. "She wanted the life I could give her. You're the one who convinced her to throw it all away." "Sophia made her own choice when she saw who you really are," I said firmly, "and I think you should leave now." He stared at me for a long moment, then said with quiet menace, "This isn't over. My family doesn't lose." But it was over as Sophia remained resolute despite Brandon's escalating efforts to reclaim her. The final attempt came 6 weeks after the cancelled wedding, when he somehow obtained her new cell number and called late at night. "I miss you," he told her, his voice soft and seemingly vulnerable in a way she hadn't heard before. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened, about how things went wrong. I could change Sophia. We could start fresh, do things differently." For a brief moment, Sophia later admitted to me she felt the pull of what might have been, the beautiful life she had imagined with him, the dreams they had shared. But then he said something that made everything clear again. She told me over dinner at my house, "I've talked to Dad, and he's willing to give your mother a role in one of our charitable foundations. Something with a good title that would make her feel important without her having to actually make decisions." We both burst into laughter at the absurdity of it. that even in his attempt at reconciliation, Brandon couldn't help but reveal his fundamental misunderstanding of what had gone wrong. "What did you say?" I asked. I told him that he still didn't get it, and that I wished him well, but didn't want him to contact me again. She smiled a genuine, unburdened smile I hadn't seen in months. And then I blocked his number. 6 months after the day that should have been her wedding, Sophia had found her footing again. She had moved into a small but charming apartment downtown, had received a promotion at work that had nothing to do with her connection to the Sullivans, and had reconnected with friends she had neglected during her relationship with Brandon. More importantly, she had reconnected with herself, the authentic, compassionate woman who valued substance over status, who recognized the true meaning of importance in relationships. As for me, I returned to my life at the hospital with a renewed appreciation for the community that had supported me through decades of challenges. Maria organized a weekend trip to a nearby lake resort for our friend group using some of the wedding money I had withdrawn. "To important people," she toasted on our first night there, raising her glass with a wink. "The most important," I agreed, looking around at the faces of friends who had stood by me through widowhood, single parenthood, and now this unexpected late life lesson in standing up for myself. A year after the wedding, that wasn't Sophia, met James at a community garden volunteer day. He was a high school history teacher with a passion for urban gardening and social justice. Their relationship developed slowly, naturally, without the whirlwind of luxury and status that had characterized her time with Brandon. The first time she brought him to Sunday dinner at my house, I watched how he interacted with her. The genuine interest in her thoughts, the respect in his eyes, the easy way he helped me clear the table without being asked. "What do you think?" Sophia asked later, as we washed dishes together, James having stepped outside to take a call from his sister. "I think he sees you," I said simply. "The real you." She nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. "And he likes my mom," she added with a smile. "Says you remind him of his favorite aunt, who raised him after his parents died. That's a huge compliment in his book." The painful chapter of the cancelled wedding had transformed into something neither of us could have anticipated. A profound reassessment of what truly matters in life and relationships. Sophia had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ultimately happier than she might have been had she married Brandon. As for me, I had learned that even at 59 it wasn't too late to stand up for my dignity, to refuse to accept disrespect in the name of keeping peace. Those quiet calls I made the night before the wedding, calls that had seemed so difficult, so potentially destructive at the time, had turned out to be acts of love, not just for myself, but for my daughter as well. Sometimes the most important people in your life aren't those with impressive titles or bank accounts. They're the ones who see your true worth, who respect your journey, who stand by you when life falls apart and help you rebuild it piece by piece. And sometimes the most valuable gift you can give someone you love is the courage to walk away from a beautiful illusion toward a more authentic, if less polished, reality. So, what about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that seemed devastating at the time, but ultimately led to something better? Or have you stayed in a situation where you weren't fully respected because it seemed easier than facing change? Leave a comment below and share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their worth.